Hi, my name is Naresh Agarwal. I'm an associate professor at the School of Library and Information Science at Simmons University in Boston. And my talk today is on an information behavior model on disinformation and fake news. So you can find my email address over here. It's agarwal@simmons.edu. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me on at NareshAG, and that's my website address over here. So I bring to you the greetings of the faculty, staff, and students of Simmons University in Boston, and that's a university campus. We have a new science, new tower that will be coming up on top of the science building over here, and that's my office on the second floor of the Palace Road building over here, and that's the School of Management building. It's now called the School of Business, and that's the main college building in Simmons University. So when we think of my research area, it would be in the field of information science, which we can broadly understand as the interaction of humans with information, often mediated by technology, as we are right now, as you're watching my talk. So think of an actor or a user which is at the heart of this, and Brenda Derwin likes to call it a body, mind, heart, and spirit with a past history, a present reality, and future dreams or ambitions. So it could be a conference attendee like yourself, or a working person, a student, a child, or any other person. And this person has some need for information, and at that point the person starts looking for information from one or more sources. Could be from friends or family, or could be from books in the library, or could be from computer-based systems using a tablet or a smartphone or a computer-based computer desktop and so on. And sometimes we find information serendipitously when we're not really looking for it. Now, what happens? So the information comes about in these one or more ways. When we talk about disinformation or fake news, then we cannot be sure that the information that we are thinking that we are getting by chance, and we have this big aha moment, is that something that we found by chance or accident, or has that information be planted for us in order to find it? So is it genuine serendipity or not? So when it comes to disinformation, there's one way to test for serendipity, which can really help us determine if the information that we're looking at is true or not. And as we get information from one or more sources, we try to make sense of it, and some of our questions get answered, maybe some don't, and we repeat this cycle. Not because all our questions get answered, but because at some point we give up because we think that's enough for now, and we might be tired. And we also avoid information at times. For instance, when we look for information to do with pandemic or often a disease diagnosis and so on. For the last few years, I've been doing research on the non-response behavior of people using smartphones. So what happens if people do not respond to your text calls or messages sent on Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp and so on, and how does the sender feel? And what can we do to help them make the interaction better? So this entire thing can be seen as human information behavior, but when we think in terms of fake news or disinformation, then it would be, we can think of it in terms of disinformation or malinformation or misinformation behavior as well, when we talk about that phenomenon in a while. And I'm also interested in studying context. I wrote a book on exploring context and information behavior that came out in 2018. And I also have a book coming out very soon, which is called the Glory, Not the Story, 25 Journeys Towards Ikigai. And this book will be published in South Asia as Engineering to Ikigai, 25 Journeys Towards Purpose. So let's go and look a little more at the phenomena. So we're talking about these terms that we find very often. We see the hoax and propaganda and fake news and disinformation. All of these things are terms which we have gotten to see quite a bit in the past few years, and especially when the COVID-19 pandemic hit sometime in by March of 2020, and about 1.5 years ago. And since then, we find that a lot of false information was spread for the COVID-19 pandemic, and which really came in the way of trying to control the spread of the disease. And so I created a video in Hindi in March 2020, in the early stages of the pandemic, to try and tell people the ways in which the virus is spread, and how we can maintain social distancing to try to keep each other safe. Of course, that's common knowledge now, but at that point, uh, there was a lot of false information, and correct information was difficult to come about. So, looking back at the same model that we have, so the phenomena of interest for us in this talk is disinformation. So let's look at briefly what the differences between these terms are. So when we have information, the question that comes to us is it true? Is it correct? If it's correct, then that's what we are concerned with. And information scientists and libraries and archives and museums have been working for a very long time, for many years, to try and provide access to information to the general public and to people in various scenarios. Like, for instance, in academic libraries do that for faculty and students in a university setting. But when that same information becomes polluted or false in some way, then that defeats the very purpose of making information accessible. So here, if information is false, then yes, then that is the general term that can be understood as misinformation. And if it's intentional, then it is disinformation. So false information which is intentionally false and meant to deceive can be understood as disinformation. And when it is applied to the context of news, it's called fake news. And this term fake news became more prevalent in the past few years, around the 2016 US elections and sometime around that. But disinformation, propaganda, and rumors, terms like that have been around for a very long time. So who are the authors of this false information? It could be someone wanting to make money, satirists, untrained journalists, partisans who want to influence, and all of these people. So when we think of misinformation, there is this reality versus competing narratives. So there are times when we want to, when people might want to change what the general public believe, especially in political parties, when one party is trying to influence the public to believe in their version of events. And when we have this narrative, that's when a lot of this false information is spread. So it could be a narrative one, things like we become stronger by being selfish, or we become stronger by sharing, or ethno-cultural nationalism is more important, or civic nationalism is more important, or things like science is more important than religion, or religion is more important than science. Of course, these are very basic examples that I'm trying to do, but often these are more complex in the context of societies and particular countries and institutions where fake news or false information is spread. So there is a bending of news and social media towards particular narratives. There is often the left versus right, or the liberal versus conservative. And one of the things, so which often leads to polarized points of view or polarization. And one of the things which I learned in my discussion with Professor Thomas Froelich was that he mentioned to me that different narratives or different versions of the event are different, but they're not necessarily the same. So it could be that one party is engaging much more disproportionately in false information and not relying on science, and the other party might also have false information that is being put out, but then it could be much less in proportion. So just something to take in mind, that different points of view are different but not necessarily equivalent in terms of the way they spread out false information. So what are the implications? Why does it matter that people are spreading and consuming false information? And it matters because people actually end up believing disinformation as truth. And that has been, this is an old citation from 1992, but even in subsequent studies as well, this has repeatedly been seen that people are not able to distinguish what is fact and what is the belief. And especially when there is enough repetition, that when that information is put out again and again and again to us, then people think that is the truth. And if it's coming from sources which people believe in, if it's coming from people that media and sources that people think are good, or which conforms to the belief systems, then they believe that that information is true, rather than trying to verify it for themselves. So that is a huge problem. So these are some top messaging apps by country. You have WhatsApp Messenger that being used in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and a lot of other countries. And we have Facebook, largely used in North America, WeChat in China, and so on. And Viber is again used in some of the countries. We have Line Messenger used in Taiwan. So these are many of these messaging apps, and a lot of the false information is spread through these messaging apps as well. For instance, in WhatsApp, and here you have the most used social media platforms. There is YouTube and Facebook Messenger. So YouTube is very largely used, and there are many of these other platforms that are in use now. This is as of January 2020. So this is an infographic of what happens in one internet minute as of 2021. So you have 21.1 million texts are sent in 1 minute, and then 500 hours of content uploaded, and then 695,000 stories shared on Instagram, and 69 million messages sent on Messenger and WhatsApp and so on. So the question then is, how much of this is correct information, and how much of this is disinformation, and how are people to then make sense of what is correct versus not? So that is one huge issue. So why does disinformation spread? Because there is ease of copying, pasting, and sharing, and this information is seeded on sites to entice people into sharing. And there's also the role of computer-based algorithms and bots that are utilized to share this false information. So if this information is shared, that's fine. Those are the people who are creating it. They're the people who are sharing it. But why do we, as the general public, why do we people who are thinking people supposedly, why do we believe this false information? So that is because we all have this inherent cognitive bias or confirmation bias, so where we tend to believe things which conform to our pre-existing beliefs. We don't like things and information which makes us uncomfortable, or which requires us to stretch beyond our current thinking. So we also tend to like people who agree with us, and sometimes when people don't disagree with us, we tend to not like them as much, and that happens because of our confirmation bias. So here, when we have objective facts, and here we have facts which things that conform to our beliefs, this is what we tend to see, that this part of the facts that agree with our pre-existing beliefs. So we have this news from media which is fitting in with our biases, and we have our own ingrained cognitive biases, and then we also have social media and contacts that are feeding us images, texts, and videos that conform with our biases. So what this creates in effect is an echo chamber. Now, this is highly problematic because even though we are now supposedly connected with so many people, and we have this information age, but really it's a post-truth world now, that though we are connected to people, but we are connected to biased sources which are not giving us the correct information, and even though we feel we are connected, the TV channels we are watching might be giving us false information. So we think it's shown on TV, or it's coming from a particular website, or a particular contact is giving us that information, but a lot of that is false, and people who are not trained on critical thinking are not able to distinguish between what is true versus not. So think of it as a frog living in a well, and this frog in the well meets the frog from the sea, and asks the frog from the sea, like, how big is the sea? And the frog from the sea says, it's like really big. And then the frog from the well asks, like, is it bigger than my well? So the question is, this frog in the well is not able to distinguish, not able to imagine how big the sea or the ocean is, and imagines that the world is that little thing, which that small amount of water that is there in the well. And so it's similar to that. Now even though we are connected now, we are like frogs in the well when we live in our own echo chamber, where we do not see other differing points of view. So we live in a filtered bubble where targeted ads are shown to us, and our personal data is being used to send us all these targeted ads. So we are in touch with people with the same beliefs, with the same ideas, with the same information, and we live in this bubble now, and we do not have access to information which is objective and which may not necessarily conform with our beliefs. So what are the current efforts to fight disinformation? So we have libraries, and we have information literacy programs, and LibGuides, and social media like Facebook and Twitter and all that. They've done things like hiring fact-checking teams, or disrupting financial incentives for creating false information, and sites like Google have come up with ranking improvements and easy reporting, and coming up with new tools. Twitter has removed a lot of troll and fake accounts, and sometimes governments have also played a role in trying to work with social media giants to fight false information. Sometimes this is seen as problematic because some people believe that government should be out of this purview, and let people, let other bodies take care of true information. So that is one big issue as well. So this is a very famous infographic from IFLA about how to spot fake news. So first is to consider the source, click away from the story to investigate the site, its mission, and its contact info, and then to read beyond. So headlines can be outrageous in an effort to get clicks. So we need to find out what's the whole story. And we also need to check the author and do a quick search on the author and to find out if they are credible or not. We need to look for supporting sources and clicking on the links determine if the information given actually supports the story. And we also need to check the date, because a lot of the times people believe that a lot of old information is circulated, or information coming in different contexts, different countries is circulated as information coming in a current date. Also see if it is a satire or a joke. And the most important and the most difficult thing is to check our own biases and to see if our beliefs are affecting our judgment in some way. And we also can ask the librarians and experts to help us determine if the information is correct or not. So, and this infographic has been translated into multiple languages, and you can also help towards this translation. And here's a list of fact-checking websites. This one is a link from Wikipedia. So let me show that to you. So here we have a list of fact-checking websites. So this is let's say the fact-checking websites in the United States. Here you have Climate Feedback, factcheck.org, Fact Checker, Media Bias Fact Check, and so on. And then you have similar sites. Let's say in India, here you have Alt News, Boom, Vishwas News, India Today Fact Check, and so on. And so sites like these are very, very helpful in trying to determine if the information you find is correct or not. And sometimes if you're not sure, you can just do a search for that information and write hoax next to it. If it is false information, you'll get to know. And we also need to be careful about fraudulent fact-checking websites, which are there to fool people into thinking that they're checking for information, but there's actually not fraudulent websites. Okay, and then we also have the websites to check for the biases of media, and this is like a mediabiasfactcheck.com, and this will tell us to what extent is certain media biased or not. So that is a good site to check as well. So this was a paper, this was a conference poster with Faraj El-Saidi, who was one of the PhD students at Simmons University in Boston. And we did this understanding of fighting disinformation and fake news, where we proposed an information behavior framework and model. And we also have a paper under review in a journal currently, which is much more expansion on our thoughts on this and on a model as well. So I do want to briefly show you the information behavior framework, or the fake news phenomena, as well as ways to find it. So the reason why this model is useful, I think, is because it not just tries to understand and explain the phenomena, but also tries to incorporate various ways in which we can fight disinformation. So this disinformation arises in a certain context, and there's a spread of fake news over a period of time. So this part is talking about the spread and the diffusion of false information. And you have the user's own intention or confirmation bias. So as the user or the consumer of fake news, we have our own biases, and we have the intentions and biases of the people who are creating and spreading false information. And these people might use algorithms, bots, and social media to deceive. So as the user judges the reliability and credibility of sources, you might choose to ignore the false information, or you might decide to use it. But depending on your own biases, you might also decide to forward or to spread information. And if it is false, and as you forward and spread it, then you are partaking in this process of misinforming and disinforming people. So depending on whether based on the user's perception of whether the information is true or false, whether it's correct or incorrect, if it is correct, then we can think of it as in terms of information. But if it is false, and if you think that it's false, then that would be misinformation or disinformation. And here this whole thing is there within context, and we also have the user's filter bubble or echo chamber. That is the the amount and the types of various sources that we're connected with, and that is providing us with information. So that is our own personal echo chamber or filter bubble. And the ways to fight fake news is to puncture the user's filter bubble, and how this can happen. And we can do this through critical thinking and action. Now, this is really, really important, because critical thinking is this process by which we are able to determine our own biases and see whether the assumptions, whether what we are thinking of is just an assumption or an opinion, or is it actually objectively correct or not. So critical thinking is a very important process, and we have to make that more important and more centerpiece of all that we do as educators, as librarians, as the general public. And especially in our primary and secondary schools, we need to teach our school children critical thinking, because by the time they grow up, their confirmation biases and belief systems might be very set. These are stories which our parents and elders teach us as we're growing up, and even if we find them to be false later on, these are difficult to shake them off. And advocacy is very, very important. We can play a very important role in telling people to fight fake news, and to show them various tools and mechanisms by which we can do that. Serendipity test I mentioned earlier, we have this in one of our papers with Sanda Erdeliz and Isa Yanke. And in the serendipity test, it is basically testing if the information that we are finding by chance is actually by chance, or is somebody planting that information. And again, programs like information literacy and media literacy and digital literacy, those are really, very, really important in helping people fight fake news. So there is this website called protruthpledge.org, and in this site, it's a great site, and we can take this pledge to share the truth, to verify, fact-check information to confirm it is true before accepting and sharing it. And balance is seeing the whole truth. Even if some aspects do not support my opinion, cite is share my sources so that others can verify my information. Clarify, distinguish between my opinion and the facts. And honor the truth, so acknowledge when others share true information, even when we disagree ourselves. Reevaluate if my information is challenged. Retract if I cannot verify it. Defend others when they come under attack for sharing true information, even when we disagree otherwise. Align my opinions and my actions with true information. And encourage the truth. So fix is ask people to retract information that reliable sources have disproved, even if they are my allies. Educate, compassionately inform those around me to stop using unreliable sources, even if these sources support my opinion. Defer is recognize the opinions of experts as more likely to be accurate when the facts are disputed. And celebrate those who retract incorrect information statements and update their beliefs towards the truth. So this is a pledge that we can all take, and if you agree with it, you can choose to sign this and help grow this. I think that's a great pledge that we can take as citizens in order to fight false information. So going back to my initial model over here, so here you have disinformation now instead of information coming about, and we can do a serendipity test. And sense making here is really important to try and make sense if information is true or not. And critical thought and action plays a very important role in this sense making process now. And we also need to be able to learn to evaluate the reliability of sources to see whether it is credible or not. So critical thinking and evaluation of reliability are key components in determining whether information is true or not, and being able to fight false information. But there is this big problem in the sense that there is this image which I also used in my starting slide, which is that of a person and an umbrella. So the false information or fake information that is coming in, it can be seen off as rain pretty much. There's so much of it, and it is unlikely that it is going to stop or slow down anytime soon. But we can teach people to hold umbrellas and try and ensure that the people do not get wet with this false information, and these umbrellas protect us to some extent. So all of these various strategies that we talked about, that we have here in terms of critical thinking and action, advocacy, serendipity test, information literacy, media literacy, all of these can be seen of basically as umbrellas that we're holding on to try to fight this huge heavy rain of false information that we have to face. So thank you. So this is my email address over here and my Twitter handle, and that's my personal website. And I also have this website called projectonenessworld.com, where I've been interviewing information science people So so feel free to reach out to me. Thank you. So this is Project Oneness World. It has interviews of Tony Carbo and and Michelle Clunan and Lela Maru from Kuwait University and Eileen Abel. So more interviews will be carried out subsequently as well. So currently these are information science people, but the site will have information from people from various walks of life. And this is also there on YouTube and Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. So thank you so much. And do email me at agarwal@simmons.edu if you have any questions. So it's naresh.agarwal or Agarwal, both of them will work. And or you can follow me on Twitter. So I'd be happy to answer your questions then.